Let's do it. Yeah.
Good to go.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Wow, awesome. So many people here, but I can't see your faces, but that's okay. You can turn your cameras on if you want or leave them off. But anyways, hi everyone. Thank you for being here today and joining us for this evening where Mariana Muñoz Gomez is going to read her new artist book, Mapping Elsewhere. I just want you to know that we have live transcription available. You can go to the bottom where it says CC/live transcripts. Is that right? Jean and Kaylin? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So you can turn it on or off, and you can also drag and drop it anywhere you want. And we also have ASL here tonight. Christina and Cindy are doing ASL interpretation, and they'll be switching back and forth. So thank you both for being here. And we're also going to be giving like visual descriptions of the speakers for accessibility. So I will start. I have long wavy brown hair. I have light skin. I'm wearing a green and floral blouse. And behind me, I have small pieces of artwork and then a large text piece. Yeah. So yeah, my name is Christina Hajjar. I'm a queer Arab writer, artist, and cultural worker. I completed a curatorial internship at the School of Art Gallery, University of Manitoba over the fall and winter. University of Manitoba is located on Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I say this as a first-generation settler and a guest on stolen land. Centering my work around diaspora will always be on the premise that I exist within and need to disrupt patterns and systems of displacement and state violence. Yesterday was the National Day of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People. There was a collective outcry on Instagram today because overnight the app had censored many posts speaking about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, and people found that their content had been removed. This happened to me as well, and many, many others who shared posts not only about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, but also posts about state violence currently happening in Colombia and Palestine. We must remain vigilant and continue practicing a myriad of resistance strategies on and offline. I see art practices and art institutions as opportunities for learning and relationship building, and as necessary sites for decolonization and anti-oppression. On January 30th of this year, the School of Art Student Association published calls to action in regards to anti-Blackness and racism at the school. I call on the School of Art to read and reread those calls to action and to take steps toward change and accountability. And I'm gonna pop the link in the chat so you can review it later. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So our guest tonight, Mariana, is one of the artists in the exhibition Cause to Become. This reading was planned in conjunction with the exhibition. Cause to Become is a group exhibition formed around queer diaspora, and it includes the artists Wes Harmon, Mariana Muñoz Gomez, Florence Yee, and Hagera Salam Shimbi Segeya Gebrhiwat. I think I saw some of them here, but okay, I won't put you on the spot. So Mariana and I make zines together, and I was really interested and excited when she was creating her new artist book, Mapping Elsewhere. The book traces her relationship to place, land, home, history, and identity. I appreciate stories like these that feel like an inside look into a diasporic reckoning with one subject position in order to painstakingly piece together lineage and consider what it means to walk on these lands. Knowing Mariana as an avid walker, it's exciting to see how she reflects on the spaces she encounters every day, or the spaces that live in her memory that are just as intimate and ingrained in her being. Mapping Place includes drawings and text rooted in Mariana's interactions and understandings of these spaces. I see this work as relevant to the themes in Cause to Become because of the way that art making and writing is a site of processing and making visible alternative routes for becoming. By witnessing Mariana in her own contemplation of land, history, and identity, she creates a model for us to learn from. This work, which is the aesthetic practice of queer diaspora, enables us to shift what we see and how we see it. It challenges the Canadian dream, and as Gayatri Gopinath puts it, it enables new forms of affiliation and relationality. So this is the official launch of Mariana's book. She's going to read it in full and also let us know when it's going to be ready for purchase. I want to remind you that Cause to Become will be up until May 14th, so you have about another week left. And while you're there, you can also see 2 other shows curated by Blair Fornwalt. There's A Story in the Middle with Catherine Blackburn, Lucienne Dury, Melanie Monaceros, and Audie Murray, as well as Night Garden, which is a film piece by Kaith Batty. I'm going to put the information to schedule a gallery visit in the chat box. Okay, it's there. Thank you to the School of Art Gallery staff Blair Fornwalt, Donna Jones, C.W. Brooks, Jean Borbridge, C.L. Cottle, and Casper Stein. Thanks to the staff at the School of Art for their support, particularly Trevor Beziak and Kaylin Harrison. And Kaylin is here on tech tonight, so you can send her a message if you're having any tech issues. My curatorial internship at the School of Art Gallery was made possible through funding from the Government of Canada through the Young Canada Works program, Building Careers in Heritage. And this talk is being live streamed right now to YouTube. So we'll have time at the end for questions on either platform. And if you missed the last talk in conjunction with Cause to Become, which was the lecture with Gayatri Gopinath, it's saved on the gallery's YouTube page. And I'm gonna put that in the chat box so you can have that later. So everybody has homework. And now I'd like to finally introduce you to Mariana. Mariana Muñoz Gomez is a Latinx artist, writer, curator, and settler of color based on Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Their work is concerned with language, place, identity, diaspora, and displacement within post and settler colonial contexts. Her lens-based practice involves a variety of media, including text works, screen prints, and photography. Mariana works collaboratively with a number of collectives, including Carnation Zine and Window Winnipeg. And she's also a Scorpio, which was not in her bio, but I'm sure that you're wondering. It's where the energy is coming from. So welcome, Mariana. You can feel free to give your audio description and then take it from there. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christina, for that great introduction. And yeah, just reminding everyone of a lot of important things to keep in mind. I've already opened up some of the links that you sent, so that'll be great to look at later. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. I see a few artists in the show are here. Yes, Florence, I am a Scorpio. I saw that in the chat. And I also want to say hello to my family, who I think is tuning in the YouTube stream. So hi, family. Yeah, and I think I will just go ahead and start flipping through the book. I've got an introduction that I'll read through there as well. Oh, and I also wanted to say thank you to Lech Kinloch from also as well to Artist Book Library. I really started making this book when I applied to an artist book mentorship and creation program that she was running there. And to also thank you to Patrick Cruz, who was my mentor. And I'll also give a shout out. I see Mel Monaceros is here and Hassan Ashraf. Us three were the mentees that year. So yeah, I'll just get started with my screen sharing. So this book is called Mapping Elsewhere. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to give a visual caption of myself. I'm wearing a dark turtleneck with a shiny earrings and necklace with a light background. There's a plant to my left and some bike wires to my right. And you might see a furry little cat running around at some point. So back to Mapping Elsewhere. Here's my short introduction. I was born in Pachuca, Hidalgo, Mexico, and my family moved to this place we learned was Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, when I was a young child. I grew up being able to visit my family in Mexico every few years. As an adult, I realized that many immigrants don't have this opportunity of going back home and being with family often. I remember the bicentennial of Mexico's independence becoming a point of questioning for me. I realized that Mexico's Independence Day was a celebration of the country's separation from something, and later came to understand this as a rejection of colonialism to a certain extent. Colonialism in its legacy and new iterations continues to function there. Even though I didn't understand it quite like that as a teenager, it still caused me to question what Canada was. I thought, Canada hasn't separated from Britain. Canada isn't fighting for its independence from another country. I wondered more about how Canada came to be. In this book, I reflect on some ways I've come to understand my relationship to place, land, home, history, and identity. My parents moved our family here, as most immigrants do, for a better life. I know that I would be a different person if we hadn't moved here. I am grateful to be able to come into being here in this place, in so-called Canada. It took until adulthood for me to learn that the story of the making of Canada is involved with genocide, exploitation, dispossession of Indigenous peoples from their lands, and occupation of lands. I learned about the idea of terra nullius, a Latin phrase that basically means empty land or nobody's land. This concept was used to justify settler colonial occupation of lands around the world, including here in this land widely known as Canada. This concept also aims to erase the long-standing presence of Indigenous peoples and their relationships to place, and with the land they live on and travel through. These parts of history aren't presented honestly in the Canadian citizenship test or in Canada's public image to the world. At least I don't remember learning this in the process of getting my Canadian citizenship or in grade school. I mostly grew up in Winnipeg. Within the last decade, the practice of opening events with a land acknowledgement by the host organization started becoming more popular here, at least to a point where I can remember noticing this becoming a regular thing at a bookstore I worked at. So that is to say, where I noticed this becoming a standard practice in the events and places that I was involved in. Over these years, the land acknowledgement that has become standard in Winnipeg includes recognizing that Winnipeg is located within Treaty 1 territory and that this is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I have also observed this presented as the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Ininiwak or Cree, Anishinaabe or Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I learned from my colleague and friend, Neep Dooley, that she uses the spelling Anishinaabe with a G at the end, and that the spelling of autonyms like this may differ in part due to regional dialects. Learning about whose traditional lands these are helps to dispel the narrative of this place as Canadian land. I've ended up doing a lot of my research about Mexico and questioning of place from here in Winnipeg over the internet. When my family and I visit Mexico, we mostly visit family in the states of Morelos, Puebla, and Mexico City. According to the Atlas de los Pueblos Indígenas de México, which is the Atlas of Indigenous Groups of Mexico, presented by the Instituto Nacional de los Pueblos Indígenas and el Instituto Nacional de Lenguas Indígenas, the National Institution of Indigenous Languages, with data from 2015. There are 35 Indigenous communities represented in Morelos' population, Nahua peoples having the highest population. In Puebla, there are 41 Indigenous communities, of which Mazateco, Mixteco, Nahua, Popoloca, Tepehua, and Totonaco peoples have the highest population. And in Mexico City, there are 43 Indigenous communities, of which Nahua peoples represent the highest population. Native Land Digital is a Canadian organization which incorporates community feedback in their website, nativeland.ca, to map global Indigenous territories. Using this website, I see Morelos includes the land of the Nahua peoples, including Mexicas, the Matlalcinco, Tlahuica, and Ocultec. I see that Puebla includes the land of Nahua peoples, including Mexicas, the Ngi-Iba, or Popoloca, the Ashuta Enima, or Mazateco, the New Sabi, or Mixtecapan, and the Cholulteca, the Tepehua, the Ñañu, or Otomi, and the Totonaco. And I see that Mexico City includes the land of the Mexica, the Ñañu, or Otomi, and the Cuicuilco. I share this information because growing up in Winnipeg and visiting Mexico has enabled me to compare my life here and there and try to learn from both experiences. I noticed things that have happened differently in each place, which leads me to question what I know about the other. For instance, I haven't experienced being at an event in Mexico that is opened with a land acknowledgement. So here I am sharing what I've learned to acknowledge the Indigenous lands in all the places I call home. Learning to position myself in the world, learning about the narratives that inform my reality, asking questions about who I am learning from, unfolding my relationship to place and identity will be a lifelong journey. This book is one part of that process, and I welcome corrections from and conversations with anyone who has more information to share. I am grateful for the opportunity to process this learning as an artist, and up to this point, primarily physically here in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory. Warmth. Leaving my oscillating fan to step outside is hardly the fresh relief I thought a cool breeze might bring. I know I've been sitting still for too long, though. A malaise has crept up on me and made time simultaneously linger as it blurs past. So I welcome the bird song ringing clear in my ears and the sun on my neck as my feet lead the way around my neighborhood. I've been going on more walks without purpose lately. No errand, no final destination. Today I walked past the drugstore instead of turning left. I passed some condos I hadn't noticed before. Suddenly I am halted by the scent of some leaf, some soil I realize I just walked past. I don't have a strong sense of smell, so I am surprised that this full aroma has caught my attention so distinctly. I walk back and forth across this patch of sidewalk a few times to try to figure out which plant it could be. A little further, I've started crossing to the shade on the other side of the road, and I find myself in front of an empty patch of land. A small sign and flimsy chain tell me private property and do not cross. Only the pillars and iron gates announcing and protecting whatever used to be there remain. I guess it's not quite an empty lot. There's soil, grass growing strong, and skinny tall trees. As I keep walking just around the bend, another patch of land, nothing but green, and another small sign reading "No trespassing, private property." I hear a crow circling around before I see it choose a tree to land on. I immediately forget what the sign tells me and I come closer, admiring the sprinkling of light streaming through the trees and onto the grass, buzzing with ants. As I keep walking and come back up by the drugstore, I decide I'm not ready to go home and walk over the bridge towards the legislative grounds. I head down to the right towards the river, the way I like going on my bicycle to feel the air rush by me. Winnipeg has a lot of Tindale Stone architecture. I see it all around me, in the structures leading down to the Riverwalk, the structures leading up to the legislative building, a platform where a statue of Louis Riel stands, and behind Riel there is the legislative building itself, on top of which the Golden Voice stands. The Manitoba Legislative Building, completed in 1920, is a significant example of this stone in architecture. Other government buildings throughout Canada, such as Ottawa's Parliament buildings and the Canadian Museum of Civilization, have used Tindale Stone too, as it is well suited to harsh climates. Before the official Tindale Stone began being quarried around Garson, Manitoba in 1895, a similar limestone had been quarried since 1832 near Lower Fort Garry. In fact, the fort's walls and the governor's residence at the site were built with a Tyndall-esque limestone in 1832. Treaty 1 was signed at Lower Fort Garry 39 years later, following organized petitions and actions by Anishinaabe in the late 19th century preventing further Canadian development in their lands. Canada was forced to meet them to negotiate a treaty. Representatives of the British Crown and Anishinaabe negotiators met at Lower Fort Garry in 1871 to discuss the Anishinaabe plan for the region. Treaty 1 was signed, although the two parties did not fully understand each other's concepts of land ownership and views of belonging to the land. Anishinaabe Métis legal scholar Amy Kraft explains, the Anishinaabe did not surrender their land in the Treaty 1 negotiations. It was not in their power to do so as they did not own the land. In their eyes, they were in a sacred relationship with the land, endorsed by the Creator. Whereas the Anishinaabe understood their relationship with land as fundamentally anti-capitalist, Canadian expansionists built their imagined country on capitalist concepts of land. They understood this land as property to be owned and there for the taking. Tindale Stone is fossiliferous. If you live on the prairies in the north, you know it and you have likely seen it at different scales. From government buildings all around us to the architecture of the Winnipeg Art Gallery and in smaller features in urban homes. You have found a fossil or two when you've let your eyes wander over it. This limestone has been here for millions of years, absorbing and recording history like a stone I recall at my grandparents' house. I think of a stone wall at my maternal grandparents' house in Morelos, Mexico. My grandfather was an architect. He built this house my mother and her sisters grew up in. Yet, when I asked him years ago, he couldn't tell me the name of this style of wall. I've seen it in different places in Mexico, so much so that I couldn't tell you the specifics. I know I've seen it in Cuernavaca. I'm sure I've seen it in Mexico City. I told my dad about this project I'm working on and the wall and the stones. He knew the wall I was describing, but he also couldn't tell me what to call it. He speculated that it might be popular in areas with volcanic rock. Is there a volcano near Cuernavaca? Or was there? I forget that the Popocatépetl is not so far away, although I can always see it in the distance. I pick up my phone and search. I'm reminded that volcanoes live in a different relation to time than we do. El Popo has been busy in its current eruption since 2005. Recently, it has been spewing tall plumes of ash. I Google ejecta, material thrown out as from a volcano. It has been expelling incandescent ejecta from its depths over the last 6 months or so. That stone, I've seen it in the pyramids at Teopanzolco. Esas pirámides del viejo tiempo, del templo viejo, have been around for hundreds of years, having been built on top of even older structures. As I wonder if it could be volcanic stone after all, from a Morelos long ago, I turn to the internet. After some digging, the World Wide Web confirms that Teopanzolco was built by Tlahuica hands on a foundation of volcanic lava, and that the Sontle, another volcanic rock, was recently found underneath it. I remember my grandfather telling me a story of his use of red stone, what I now think may be the Sontle, in the entry of his home. I remember other ruins shown in fragments underneath the Palacio de Cortés, Hernán Cortés's palace. I have walked by so many times to visit the market beside El Palacio, and I have been inside. It is now a museum. But I can't remember what I learned about those ruins. At home on my laptop, I wander through the internet, and I learn that El Palacio was built over a Tlahuica palace. I wonder if any of the darker stone I remember in the facade del El Palacio de Cortés is that volcanic stone, same as the one in the walls at my grandparents' house. I recall the cathedral that the Spanish built on top of the Templo Mayor of the Mexica as Tenochtitlan became La Ciudad de Mexico. These stones stay in my mind for a while, stones that have been used to create homes and claim power over hundreds of years. Recently, I saw a meme from Chicano Chisme, aka Ruben Angel. A forlorn yet gently smiling Kermit the Frog is looking at himself in a mirror, reaching out to himself. In the text accompanying the image, Ruben writes about the process of self-identification as a colonized subject of Latin America and how knotted in the unknown it can be. So you reach out to the reflection of a body that you may not know what to call, but is still forever yours. I remember growing up in Winnipeg and seeing commercials on TV for Ancestry.com. I don't think I would find much on there. I didn't have the same words for it, but it's what Ruben was saying. It's what modernity and industrialization and globalization and colonialism and history have done to many of us, descendants of colonized subjects and those individuals themselves. Once before he passed, after I had developed or started developing my thinking on subjectivity as a person of color in Canada, as an immigrant in Canada, as a Mexican in Canada, as a settler in Canada, as a settler of color in Canada, as a racialized person in Canada, as a child of immigrants, as a child of Mexican immigrants seeking better opportunities for their family, as a child of Mexican immigrants whose trajectory was influenced by capitalism, as a subject within settler colonialism, within capitalism, as a racialized subject within these systems, as a subject complicit in these systems. Once before he passed, I asked my maternal grandfather about his roots. Something like, Beto, ¿de dónde eran tus papás? The conversation continued, and I only remember que dijo, soy mexicano, muy mexicano. I didn't get the straightforward answer that I was looking for. I should have just asked, ¿de dónde viene mi piel morena? Is it from my father and my maternal grandfather? Where can I trace their brown skin to? I've only ever known that I am Mexican and that my family has Spanish and German ancestry. When I look at my skin's brownness, I think of my family, and I know that wherever I embody movement and a tangled history. In the year 2000, my family left Mexico for a second time to settle in Winnipeg. I learned about my place of birth mostly from a distance, mostly on the internet. As for the place I live in, Canada, Manitoba, Winnipeg, I don't recall much from my high school history class, but I know that what I have learned of this place has mostly come from friends, peers, books, memes, and the internet. When we can't rely on schools or the government to teach the full history of this place and what it means today, we have to search for the voices that are teaching. We have to teach ourselves to look for a way to understand what it means to live in this place here. As an adult, I learned that I am not in Canada. I learned that this is not North America. I learned that Winnipeg used to be Red River. This place became a significant site in the history of Canadian expansionism into the Northwest and in the history of Indigenous resistance to dispossession. I learned that Winnipeg is included in the lands encompassed by Treaty 1, and that these are the traditional lands of Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I learned that people who are Indigenous to the area currently known as the state of Morelos may identify with dozens of Indigenous communities, including Nawa, Mexica, and Tlahuica communities. I learned that the creation of La Ciudad de Mexico out of Tenochtitlan was one stone in a series of stepping stones that kept Columbus's and Cortez's machines of colonial expansion well oiled. At some point, I learned that I live on an island. The traditional caretakers of this land, the people who call it their ancestral home, call it Turtle Island in English. Although my consciousness lives on one island, I fly between the nodes of what I've come to know as Canada and Mexico all my life. I do this through memory, language, relationships, photographs, navigating the internet. I do this unexpectedly when a smell or a taste reminds me of the other, when I sense something lacking. On Canada Day, when I see maple leaf flags all around me, I think about Mexico's history of some independence from its colonizers and its history of revolution, led in part by Emiliano Zapata. I understand that there is something absent in the celebration of Canada, that it is a celebratory day. Its celebratory day is based on taking in a different way. As I learn about these histories, I form new relationships with each place. I deepen my understanding of the significance of my being within them. I am able to look at this knot more clearly. I realize that untangling it may be an impossible project. Instead, I want to trace the roots that bring me to this cluster. I am present here and now, y mi mente recorre. And that's where the narrative ends. I'll just scroll through these last few pages. Some notes and references. And I guess I'll end my screen share here. Go back to the Zoom talk.
Thank you so much. Do people want to turn their microphones on and give like snaps or claps or woos?
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you.
Woo.
Woo. Yay, woo. Thank you so much for that reading. And I'm really happy that we got to watch along with the reading and see your drawings. Basically, where we're going to go from here is have a little bit of conversation. So if anyone would like to ask Mariana a question, you can pop it in the chat here on Zoom or on YouTube, and we'll make sure that they're read out loud. And I'm just going to make sure that I have YouTube open. I guess, yeah, before we get into it, I just wanted to see, like, how does that feel, like reading it for the first time, like this being the launch? And I know you've been working on it for such a long time and have read different iterations of works in progress before.
Yeah, this was my first time reading this full thing and this version of the full thing. So thanks for bearing with me on some stumbles here and there. Yeah, it feels like I have been working on this writing, or I've had it sitting around for almost a year and a half at this point. So even though I see the words often as I'm working on the layout and design and everything, I haven't spoken it out loud all at once. So that was definitely an experience.
Yeah, for sure. It was great to hear you read it, and it was nice to hear your voice and have you like scroll through the pictures slowly. If anyone wants to like revisit a certain like photo or a certain image, we could do that. And yeah, I have a couple questions prepared that I can start us off with a question here. Let me open it. So, yeah, I guess I wanted to talk a bit more about the drawings because it seems like such an intimate practice for you. It's not a part of your like fine art repertoire that you've like shown out in the world so far. You're most often making lens-based work and doing printmaking, and I'm curious about the decision to translate or remediate these photos that you took into drawings of these spaces. And yeah, just wondering like if like how that process went for you. Did it have an element of like journaling to you? Or yeah, I'm just curious about like that handmade process for you.
For sure, it did kind of feel like a bit of a diary or something, doing the drawings, and then I feel like the text itself kind of feels like a diary as well. Yeah, I consider myself more of a lens-based artist, and I do consider even this work a lens-based work. And I guess I kind of think of it that way. Some of the drawings were based on photos that I had already. In one image in particular, I think it's just in one where you can see my hand holding a photograph. So some of the photos were already existing, and then all the other drawings were also drawn from a photograph, but drawn from photos that I took out walking around in my neighborhood, knowing that I was working towards this book, but not really knowing the final form yet. So I really, at the time, I was also reading, I was being introduced to some land theory, some critical American studies that I learned a little bit about like fractal thinking and fractal theory. And these texts that I was reading were basically talking about an anti-colonial way of getting to know a place or getting to know the land around you, and not being determined to categorize everything and like put kind of absolute definitions on everything, knowing that you can never know all of it and know exactly what's going on. So the drawing was kind of an exercise to, even though I was going out and walking, also to spend more time with these things that caught my attention. And as well, I kind of saw it as a way of zooming in and zooming out, both from the experience. So zooming in maybe by spending more time with an experience, but also the act of drawing. You know, you're so focused on getting in however amount of detail you want. So there's a certain level of zooming in that I was associating with that act of drawing. In some parts of the drawings, you can see I've left some blank spaces or haven't fully fleshed out some parts of the drawings, and that I kind of saw that as a bit more zooming out or just leaving a bit more space. So that was something else that I was learning. I didn't go too far into fractal theory, but that was kind of some of the themes that were coming up in these things I was reading, this active zooming in and zooming out. So yeah, so even though they're drawings, I associate it a little bit with a lens-based approach, because they were drawn from pictures, but I think as well, just thinking about this active zooming.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's my dog. Embarrassing. So, so yeah. Would you say that this process came about because you love to walk, or like, yeah, I'm just curious about how this work really, really represents the everydayness of this research for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually, I'm trying to remember how I had applied to the artist book mentorship and creation. It was just after I made a grouping of artwork titled Recorrer, to wander, and that group of work was a video that was basically a screen capture of me in Google Maps going through my grandparents' city with some narration over it, and then a set of prints, which are the prints that are in the exhibition that you've curated, Christina. So those prints, I could do a little screen share. Maybe now's a good time. I have them loaded up on my screen here. So I'll just do a screen share so y'all can see these prints. So these are up right now at the School of Art in Cause to Become. And then this is the video piece. So the question was, right, like kind of how this kind of thinking is integrated into my practice. I think for a while I've been interested in thinking through ideas of the embodiment of movement, through especially these histories of migration. And I think for me, the fact that I've grown up visiting my family in Mexico every few years, so that kind of movement, you know, I feel like I don't travel all the time, but I do go to Mexico every few years, so it is definitely a recurring thing, a thing that happens quite often. So I think that's one part of it, one part of thinking about movement and migration, embodiment of that, and also what it really means to identity. And I think those are a lot of the themes that you're exploring in the exhibition as well, Christina. And I thought it was funny that you think of me as a walker, because I feel like I do I just feel like I've been doing a lot more walking since, like many of us have since the pandemic, to go outside for a little bit. Um, but yeah, I
I
think
love it.
especially since the pandemic, I've just been going on walks, like I said, for no purpose, which has been really nice.
Yeah, it was something I didn't realize until the second time that I read your book. And maybe, yeah, maybe that's because I realized more recently that you're like love to walk everywhere. But um, yeah, the second time that I read it, I really thought about how um, that walking was like a part of your methodology, or that like mindfulness or whatever was integrated into your imagination and the way that you reflect on the politics of space. Thanks for showing us those images as well. Yeah, they look really lovely in the show. So anyone who hasn't seen it, if you want to see it, you can. There's also going to be a walkthrough video published sometime soon, and each of the artists are going to have like a short audio clip where they kind of talk about the process and their own associations with the work. But Mariana, we have two questions in the chat. I'll read the first one. It's from Marella. Says, great reading, Mariana. I have a quick question. You've mentioned a somewhat active volcano in Mexico at the moment. Is that located near where your current family is?
Hey, Morella. Thanks for that. Yeah, it is actually located kind of right in between all those places I mentioned. So I think it straddles the state of Puebla and Morelos, and very close to Mexico City as well. But one thing I learned doing all this research, and a lot of it is just research I was doing for my own curiosity and learning about Mexico from a distance. Even before I was intending to, do my references for this book or anything, is that it's not like a dangerous volcano right now to those areas, as far as I know. Like the plume of ash and the ejecta, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal as far as volcano eruptions go. Um, so I do remember sometimes when we're in Mexico, my family will comment, or sometimes they'll send pictures if the sky is really cloudy by the volcano. Some days it's really clear. So I guess that's a little bit of evidence of the activity from the volcano. And I think there are other volcanoes as well. That's just one of um, the main ones, I guess. Yeah. And then maybe just because my mic's on, I'll just read out Francesca's question. So the next question is, do you think about the stones as bodies as well? Are you thinking about them both as living beings? Um, so I had been thinking about the stones as kind of like witnesses to these histories and to this human activity, I guess. Um, in the book, I kind of talk a little bit about this practice that I think had existed, at least in some part, even before the Spanish conquistadors got to Mexico. This practice of um, building on top of other cultures' existing structures. Um, so, for example, the Templo Mayor in Mexico City, I think that was unearthed when there was construction there. And they were building like a new metro line or something. So there's a Templo Mayor kind of underneath a cathedral that was built there by the conquistadors. So thinking about, you know, everything that these stones have seen and been part of, as well as in this practice that I'm talking about in Mexico of building on top of other cultures. Sometimes the stones are recycled and integrated into the new structure. And then thinking about the Tindale Stone here, although it's extracted from the earth in a different way, so with the volcanic stone, it's naturally spewing it out, and with the Tindale Stone here, it's being quarried by humans, so it's being extracted that way. The Tindale Stone, I think for the most part, sits underneath the earth. It's not like exposed to humans all the time. Although I see Abby Ald is on this call, who's a Tindale Stone historian who's been really generous sharing her research on Tindale Stones. And she was talking to me recently about learning about an outcropping. I think that's the right term, outcropping of Tindale Stone. So where it's exposed naturally. So yeah, I had just kind of been thinking about them as witnesses and experiencing these parts of human history alongside us.
Nice. Thank you, Mariana. Yeah, I thought that the book was so generous with the way that you kind of weave your own personal narrative of navigating space, investigating lineage, and then also sharing the history of the places that you call home. And yeah, the stone part was particularly interesting as well because of the fact that you use it in your visual arts practice. And yeah, I think that those are such landmarks in Winnipeg and Treaty One. If you're walking around the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the Métis statue that you drew. And so, yeah, it just feels really familiar and intimate. And I think that the way that you've kind of written the book is, yeah, like I said, just generous and really sweet to bear witness to. I think that a lot of people can relate to that feeling of like trying to um, research their own history and feeling, I mean, history and present, just the politics of these spaces that are, like you said, not taught. And I think that was so poignant in your conclusion with how you kind of finalized the book by saying, I realized that untangling, oh no, okay, I'm able to look at this not more clearly. I realized that untangling it might be an impossible project. Instead, I want to trace the roots that bring me back to this cluster. So yeah, I love that as a visual as well as like following these roots and creating new maps by yeah, pursuing alternative knowledges, basically. I think that's really related to the exhibition as well, and the aesthetic practices of queer diaspora in general. I think there's a question on YouTube, which I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how do we get the book?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I was hoping that the book would be ready in time for this talk. It is very close to being available, so the best advice I can give you is to keep an eye on my website. I have a news and updates page, so it's Mariana Muñoz or marianamunoz.ca, and I'll type it into the Zoom chat. I don't know if it might be linked on the School of Art page with the exhibition, but maybe we can include a link there as well when it is available. So it should be available really soon. Just some final touches to get it out. But yeah, I'm hoping to have, it'll be a small run of books.
I'm glad you made multiples, or that you're planning on making multiples. I know when I asked you earlier, you said you weren't sure if it was going to be like a one-off or going to be for available for dissemination. So I'm excited that you decided to do that. I think that's all the questions we have so far. We have a little bit more time. If anyone wants to pop in with a question, you can also feel free to unmute yourself and just ask directly if you like. But I want to give a little bit of yeah, silent time too. That's okay if you're like formulating a question.
Yeah, thank you also for the comments. I am reading them through the chat here.
Yeah, I got a lot of love.
I'm also interested in talking about the exhibition itself as well. So if anyone has comments about that, if you've gotten to see it. Thanks, Connie. Maybe one thing. Oh yeah, Blair has a question here. Oh, can you tell us more about the work in the exhibition, Mariana? Sure. Yeah, I was just flipping on my screen back to the book, and I was going to say one thing that I think connects is just a line of thinking that's connecting the book and these prints in the exhibition. Is also thinking about, I mean, you know, everyone can have a connection to photography, but I think living in diaspora, looking at photographs is something that happens a lot. And even, you know, even if you're not living in diaspora or don't identify that way, I think it can just bring up kind of I always think of it as like an emotional and a psychological transportation. So that's kind of one thing that I was interested in doing with the drawings, including drawings from my personal archive, from both of my homes, and I think at some points maybe it's kind of unclear what I'm drawing or where I'm drawing. So I kind of like that blurring of places, that maybe only I can tell where some places are. And with this work in the exhibition, all the photographs that aren't of my body are photographs in Mexico. The photographs of my body I took here, but they're also photographs of I think that have connotations of like going home. So the pink one on the left here in the image that you're seeing on screen is a photo of outside the airplane window getting into Mexico. The black photo that's cut off there in the print on the second from the left is a picture inside my grandparents' living room, just some frames on the wall. And the blue image on the right there is a landscape in Morelos. So I feel like with these images as well, maybe there's a little, not quite so much the zooming in and zooming out, but there's a bit of distance. Whereas with the book, I feel like just spending so much time with the drawings maybe felt like a generous way to allow myself to be more intimate with what I was representing. And there's some more comments and questions here. I'll just go through the chat here. I'm interested in the different modes of navigating space, walking here. I imagine you sitting and drawing on the way. And recently at Blinkers with the video work, largely shot from a car. Could you talk about these different ways of navigating a bit more? Yeah, so I recently had an exhibition at Blinkers here in town, and that work was definitely very related to the ideas and the work in this book. So thanks for that question. Yeah, I think one thing I'm thinking of is the sourcing of this imagery. So sourcing the imagery that was in the video work at Blinkers, largely shot from a car, the images that are in this book and the images that are in the exhibition at the School of Art. A lot of it is from my personal archive. So just photos and videos that I happen to take. Most of the video footage in the Blinkers exhibition and a lot of the images in this book actually that are from Mexico just happened to be from one trip in 2015. So I definitely didn't take the footage or take the images with any intention of making a project out of them. I think it was kind of I think about it as like some kind of diary or journal keeping. You know, for some reason I'm in the place and I just want to remember everything about it, or be able to look back on it and remember it when I'm not there. So that's one thing, maybe touching a little bit on that question. And then maybe I'll look at Jennifer Gibson's question here. What is the significance of the particular parts of your body that you chose to include and their positioning? So the images in the exhibition at the School of Art Gallery in Costa Bicam, I wanted to include kind of some action poses, I guess, of my body. So something that would connote movement. So some of them ended up kind of being like, I'm just going to look at them again. Yeah, like there's a little bit that you can see my hand on my leg, kind of bent. And I took that photo just practicing like sitting down and then standing up. There's some other images. I kind of see it as like a running start kind of pose, or that's the pose I was in when they took the photo. So I was just trying to communicate a bit of movement in those poses. And maybe it comes across, maybe it doesn't. But I feel like maybe including my hands and my feet a little bit, like that's what I use to move around, kind of connotes that. And then, hi, Ashley. I see Ashley has a question here. I would also like to hear more about the thoughts on the positioning of your hands. To me, it looks like they're trying to plant or find solid ground. Oh yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, that's an interesting reading. Yeah, that's great, Ashley. I think like definitely makes sense with the themes that I'm thinking about and that connection to kind of like a feeling of groundedness. That's a really great reading of that work. Thanks, Ashley.
Did you see owner's iPhone question?
Yeah, the different modes of navigating space.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, I think that might be Casey. Yeah. Yeah, for some reason I'm thinking about like taking photos and taking video and kind of navigating in that way. Yeah, your question also made me think actually of the video in my recent show at Blinkers, which was titled A Volar Entre Rocas, and the video I had in this work at Platform a couple of years ago called Recorrer to Wander. And anyway, a little bit off topic, I guess, because neither of those are in this exhibition, but the video work from a couple of years ago was a video capture of me in Google Maps navigating through my grandparents' city. And the video work in the more recent exhibition is all footage from my personal archives from a few years ago. So I feel like that kind of sense of distance or sense of presence does come up in a lot of the work, including this work at the School of Art Gallery. just comparing, getting to know a place or visiting a place via the internet, and then also having some artwork that exists because I was in that place and I was taking the footage and recording.
Yeah, I like that. The way that you use documentation is not necessarily planned, it's just happening. Or you're stockpiling documentation and then you might end up using it later, you might not.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good practice.
Yeah, and even with that Google Maps video, like that's just a thing I would do, and I was just wanting to see that city again, or when I was trying to show a friend like where my family lives, I would go to Google Maps.
Yeah, you have a good narrating voice. The Prince Require to Wander, when they were shown at Platform, that Google Maps video piece had yeah, that really nice narration along with it too.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I think we've got all the questions. I'm just like checking the different platforms and trying not to be scatterbrained, but oh wait, we do have one more. Okay, here's the last question. So how can Indigenous folks here in Canada learn from Mexico regarding the Zapatista revolution, independence, etc.?
That's a great question. I feel like I'm always wanting to learn more about this history in Mexico, and to be honest, I don't know that much that I could share like some good knowledge about that right now. But I think just speaking from my experience, being able to live a little bit in these two places, um, I think in the narration I mentioned, I don't know, I always like, I'm thinking of the other place when I'm in one place or the other. So I feel like I'm always able to just kind of compare. Like, I always think about like kind of being able to see different trajectories that history has taken in these places. So, like from my experience of being in Mexico, I can see Nahuatl, which is like the most used indigenous language there, Nahuatl, being represented in all sorts of kind of everyday spaces, and that could be like a street name, it could be like a business name, it could be kind of like a hybrid of Spanish and Nahuatl. And I haven't seen that a lot in Winnipeg or in the places that I go to here. So I feel like there's always like things to learn about these different histories and how they've resulted and continue to express themselves, I think. So yeah, one day I would like to do more projects or bigger projects kind of involving more people that know more more about these histories and these conversations, because I think that would be a really great connection to make, just to learn from each other.
Good questions. Okay, I think we're gonna leave it at that. Mariana left her website in the chat, and we'll share the artist book, a link to the artist book as well on the School of Art Gallery website when it becomes available, so we can purchase it and support you. And yeah, I'm really excited to be able to hold it physically. And I thank you for being up for this and for sharing the whole book in one sitting. Feels really awesome. And yeah, thanks for being a part of the group exhibition as well. And to the other artists who are in the show who are here. Mel is here, who's in the other show that Blair curated, A Story in the Middle. And yeah, I just wanted to give like also another shout out and thank you to Blair for being like my mentor throughout my curatorial internship, as well as Nazreen Hamada and Noor Banku for their work with me on Gayatri Gopinath's book Unruly Visions, which really informed the exhibition and the essay, which is available online to read. So yeah, schedule a gallery visit if you'd like, if you can. It's up until May 14th. And after that, it will live online. So thank you all for being here and for your time and your questions. And take care. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.